Well, guys, the worst thing ever just happened. Fortnite didn't have Freddy Fazbear, even though Tim Sweeney clearly promised us that this collab would indeed happen. Clearly, none of this would have happened if our glorious King Donald Mustard was still in charge. But on the real, how on earth is Five Nights at Freddy's 10 years old? Literally a decade ago the first game released, which is absolutely insane. And it's funny how this franchise started out as a joke project and then evolved into what is regarded as one of the greatest video game franchises of all time, but it's also been called one of the worst simultaneously. So, I'm here to solve this mystery. Is Five Nights at Freddy's that good? Now, I want to preface this video by saying that I've been a long-time fan of the franchise. I've played every official FNaF game, I've read almost every book, and I've watched way too many lore videos. But, with that out of the way, let's talk about whether Five Nights at Freddy's is that good. So, I actually won't be explaining the gameplay in this video, as I'm assuming if you clicked on this video, you understand how the game operates. But here are the spark notes that apply to every single one of these games. You play as a person, unless you're MatPat and you think that Gregory is a robot, where you have to survive the night from 12 AM to 6 AM, or just to complete the objective in mind for that specific game, where your enemies are the animatronics, and essentially, you want to survive the night with the tools that are given to you to stop these animatronics from giving you the end screen. This is admittedly a very basic formula, but 10 years ago, it was passable as a game. But honestly, this point-and-click gameplay type is extremely repetitive with each installment of the franchise that has this gameplay element. As much as they try, the developers won't be able to change this gameplay type up a lot, as this point-and-click style has many restrictions and is quite linear, and doesn't have much room for creativity, honestly. Now, that doesn't mean I think that these games are bad. Just take a look at the newer installments of the franchise. They're a lot more diverse with their gameplay styles or elements. Take Pizzeria Simulator, for example. While yes, it still has that point-and-click type of gameplay, it changes the formula up immensely, with a computer system where, rather than closing doors, turning on lights, and having to save battery, it changes all those things out with tasks you have to complete via a computer. And it still has that element where you have to be cautious of how much of something you use. In this game, that's the AC. Then there's also the purchasing phase, where you can build your own pizzeria, and you can even fight lawsuits and bring things in from the back alleyway for your own use. And this is just one of many recent FNaF games that have changed their gameplay style up immensely. Now, we need to answer the question here. If we take off the rose-tinted glasses that are the old days of playing these games, all of the MatPat videos and Markiplier playthroughs we've all seen, are these games that good on a gameplay front? In my opinion, no. No, they're not that good. They just don't reinvent the wheel on a gameplay aspect. They don't change up the genre in any significant way, and they rehash the same style in most of their games. It's a hard pill to swallow, but I just don't see how people say that these are game-breaking mechanics in any sort of way. But now, I just want to cover something a little more intriguing. The lore of Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to recap the lore, but I just want to talk about where it fits itself in the gaming space and whether or not the story is actually anything special. Now, here's what I'll give FNaF on the lore front. It is relatively original. It comes up with interesting plots and intriguing characters, and I think that's what makes the lore so well known, is the fact that the story of these games are absolutely ridiculous on all accounts. But overlooking that, since the story is so ridiculous, it sticks with audiences way more. And remember, back in the day, this was the first mascot horror game, a genre that is now milked to death. But the story was incredibly unique and original. That's why it stuck with people so much. But to answer the question, is FNaF's lore actually that good? I'd say so, yes. It's incredibly messy, and it doesn't make sense 90% of the time. And yes, the fans have filled in a lot of the information in the lore, but what we do have here is really solid, and I think it's incredibly iconic on all fronts. Speaking of iconic though, this next question will be interesting. Are content creators the reason why FNaF is popular? This one is actually the most interesting question to me. Obviously, FNaF has a huge fan base, and in that fan base there are many content creators. But amongst these creators are some of the most beloved creators on the internet as a whole. The Jacksepticeyes, the Markipliers, and of course the MatPats. And I think it's safe to say that without these creators, FNaF would be nothing. That's right, I don't think FNaF would be nearly as popular as it is today without these creators telling us about it weekly. I mean, there's a reason why people call MatPat the FNaF guy. Game theory wasn't purely FNaF, but a whole audience stumbled into a few of his videos one day talking about this small indie game called Five Nights at Freddy's, and that encouraged them to try it out. And the franchise has been continuously growing ever since that day. Without these content creators, this franchise wouldn't exist. Or maybe it would, but it would be way smaller. But to answer the question, is Five Nights at Freddy's that good? No. No, I don't think it is. While the lore of the games are great and all, not even a good story can save a game that has mediocre mechanics. Don't get me wrong, I love this franchise. It's just that I don't really think that it's a mastercraft like people say it is. And this is coming from a longtime fan too. I think it's just that once people remove the rose-tinted glasses, they'll realize that we all love this franchise so much because of the content creators and the lore. The gameplay is some of the weakest I've ever seen in a video game franchise, especially one that's been going on for as long as this one has. But if you disagree with me, let me know down in the comments below and why you think this franchise is so beloved. But anyways, that'll do it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, have a lovely night.